The city of Charlotte, North Carolina, in 1997, was breathing a typical summer heat. The streets were lined with late afternoon traffic, the buzz of air conditioners clinging to every building and the low hum of everyday life that rarely expects disruption. But beneath this mundane rhythm, in the heart of the city's financial district, a storm was quietly taking shape. One that would etch itself into the annals of American criminal history. It was the Loomis Fargo robbery. A theft both audacious and meticulously calculated, the kind of crime that seems almost impossible in retrospect, yet so inevitable in the minds of those who orchestrated it. At the center of it all was David Scott Gant, a security guard, a man who wore his uniform with the unassuming authority expected of someone entrusted with the protection of millions of dollars. To anyone else he appeared ordinary, perhaps even forgettable. But that night, David would become a figure both feared and legendary. A man whose intimate knowledge of the system would turn him into an agent of chaos. He understood the routines of the depot, the idiosyncrasies of his co-workers, the mechanical rhythms of safes, locks and alarm. Knowledge, as it often does, became power. The plan began months before the execution. David, seemingly the model employee, watched, learned and memorized. He observed the flow of money through the facility, noted the timing of deliveries and pickups, and catalogued every procedural quirk. He knew when the armored trucks would arrive, the predictable fatigue of his colleagues on late shifts, and the blind spots in the depot's surveillance system. This wasn't reckless impulse, it was patient, calculated preparation. Every detail was etched in his mind like a blueprint, and the knowledge alone was intoxicating. He was not alone though. He recruited a group of men whose personal circumstances made them pliable, willing, or at least susceptible to the lure of easy wealth. They weren't hardened criminals, but ordinary men enticed by the promise of millions. Among them was Bill Rogers, a man whose background in manual labor and mechanical aptitude made him indispensable for the logistics of moving such a fortune. The others filled similar niches, each selected for skill, trustworthiness, or perceived loyalty. Together, they were a makeshift family, bound by the shared desire to seize what was not rightfully theirs, and the silent understanding that the law would pursue them with relentless determination. The night of the robbery arrived with a deceptive calm. Charlotte seemed sleepy, the city's pulse slower than usual, streets emptying as people retreated into their homes. Within the Loomis Fargo facility, fluorescent lights cast cold reflections on polished floor. Security cameras blinked silently, recording the patterns that David had studied so carefully. The depot, for all its perceived invulnerability, was a world in which he was sovereign. His uniform, his authority, and his inside knowledge turned him from employee to predator in the shadow. They moved like ghosts. The armored guards who should have been the first line of defense became incidental obstacles, quickly subdued, their resistance minimal against the controlled force of the intruders. The violence was swift but measured, calculated not to maim but to neutralize. Every guard was tied, silenced, and effectively removed from the unfolding narrative. They became shadows themselves, watching helplessly as their own systems and trust were turned against them. And then, the money, pallets and pallets of cash, stacked meticulously, the physical embodiment of a fortune so vast it defies easy comprehension. Over $17 million in cash, real tangible wealth, lay within reach, and David's team moved with precision. They filled duffel bags, wheeled carts, and transferred bundles into waiting vehicles with a choreography that could have been rehearsed hundreds of times. The air must have been thick with tension, the quiet punctuated only by the muffled scuffle of heavy feet and the soft thud of falling bundle. Every movement was deliberate, calculated, a testament to the patient planning that had preceded the night. Exiting the facility, the crew vanished into the darkness with the ease of practiced shadows. To the outside world, nothing had changed. The city remained oblivious, the hum of traffic continuing, the mundane routines of life unbroken. It wasn't until morning that the full scope of the crime was revealed. When the first alarmed employee discovered what had transpired overnight, the reality was staggering. Millions of dollars were gone, taken not by a violent gang of outsiders, but by a man trusted implicitly, and the small cadre of men who had believed in him. The investigation was intense, the FBI and local authorities mobilizing with urgency. The scale of the theft, coupled with its inside execution, presented a challenge of unusual complexity. Where do you begin when the perpetrator is someone embedded within the system? Each interview, each forensic check, each financial trace was a step closer to understanding the audacity of the crime, and to eventually unraveling the threads that led to David and his team. But human nature, as ever, is a double-edged sword. Secrets, no matter how carefully guarded, have a way of surfacing. The sudden wealth, the subtle changes in lifestyle, the occasional boast or slip, all began to generate trails, patterns the investigators could follow, and follow they'd. One by one, the crew was identified, traced, and apprehended. The law moved methodically, exploiting the very weaknesses David had studied in others. Irony, in this case, was bitter. The careful manipulation of systems and people could not ultimately protect them from the consequences of human error. The trial was a spectacle of revelation. Details emerged that highlighted both the sophistication of the plan and the human frailties that allowed it to succeed. Testimonies painted vivid pictures of trust betrayed, of calculated cunning, and the stark collision between opportunity and moral choice. Sentences were handed down, justice administered, yet the story lingered in the public imagination. It became emblematic of the dangerous combination of insider knowledge and unrestrained ambition. Yet even with the men convicted, questions remain. The psychology of the act, the meticulous planning, the cool execution, the rapid unraveling posed enduring questions about morality, trust, and human potential for both creation and destruction. How does someone take the world they know and twist it to their own end? What compels ordinary men to commit extraordinary crimes, knowing the inevitable consequences? The Loomis Fargo robbery is not merely a story of money stolen, but of human choices, of the delicate balance between diligence and greed, and the shadowy spaces where one can become both hero and villain in the narrative of their own making. Looking back, the depot stands quiet again. The streets of Charlotte continue to pulse with life, yet the memory of that night lingers, like a scar etched into the city's conscience. The money may have been recovered in part, but the story, the audacity, the betrayal, the planning, and the execution remains, a haunting testament to what happens when opportunity meets ambition, and trust is weaponized. And in the end, the question persists, echoing in the minds of those who study such events. When the person guarding the treasure turns, can any system truly remain secure, or are we forever at the mercy of the human element, unpredictable and inexorable, lurking behind the guise of normality?